debate.
Mr. Chair.
I'm a Paul Catherine Delahunty.
I was not on the select committee, so I was very hear what the previous speaker had to say, but this is a very important issue to the Green Party. Obviously, we support the protection of endangered species 100%, and I think there's nothing more despicable than the international smuggling of our most important species, such as the 68 lizards that the last speaker was just talking to. I wanted to take a call on this issue, even though I wasn't on the select committee, because I think that we're at a very interesting time in our history in relation to how we enforce the law. The Green Party is fully in support of the full protection under law of endangered species, but the point that I wanted to discuss was that in terms of the powers that are given under this Act, the importance of recognising that we're now in a new era where a lot of land that was previously administered purely by the Department of Conservation is now administered either under or will be under co-governance regimes, or in models such as what has been developed very creatively between the government and Tūhoi in Te Urewera. And although there is no dispute about the need to protect these important species, when we enter into new forms of governance arrangements, it's basically based on, one would hope, the Article 2 of Te Treaty o Waitangi. It's an opportunity to talk about how this policing is carried out with reference to those relationships. So I think the critical word is relationships. So I would hate to see the powers be used in a way that does not recognise the cultural sensitivity of some of these situations. So there is a history of customary take, which is not affected by this bill. Customary take is clearly not affected, so there is nothing to fear in that sense for tangata whenua. But there's also a necessity for recognising that for some people, they have been arrested or charged with taking birds that are endangered. And although that's the law, and it should be the law, I and the Greens would like to see a higher level discussion between the governing parties of conservation related land and endangered species around the best mechanisms for doing that and how that is done. So although I'm not challenging this bill at all, or the powers that particularly because it's targeted at a group of despicable international smugglers taking our wildlife, I think that there is a need for a more nuanced and sophisticated conversation than we've had in the past between the treaty partners around how it's enforced, so that for people living in the forest according to their traditional ways, their customary take is protected, and this law doesn't change it, but there is still a necessity where things occur that breach the law, that the cultural understanding is deepened, that the conversation and education that tangata whenua are leading with their own, and I'm thinking of people like Kevin Prime from Ngāti Hine, who's led this for many years, about the need to protect endangered species, is recognised by my culture as well as the need for a more nuanced dialogue rather than the heavy hand of our way of going about enforcing the law. So it is a plea, I guess, that these new powers, in terms of those contexts, that there's a dialogue, that there is a discussion around our co-governing parties, wherever whenua is co-governing and where the issues are affected, so that this is not just a matter of taking power, but sharing power, and a discussion on how power might be shared in order to do that. But other than that, we are in full support of the necessity to protect our wildlife, but let's do it with recognition of Te Treaty o Waitangi, recognition of conversations and dialogue about how these powers are used, so that we do not entrench some of the misunderstandings that have existed between DOC and hapu, mana whenua hapu on the ground. It's all about relationships, Mr. Chair. It's really important that this stuff is well understood and owned by all of us, but also that we recognise the sensitivities around these relationships, because they come from a time and from the leadership of those who in the past and into the future want to sustain all their resources. Kia ora koutou.
The Honourable